Managing our, there we go, our technology. And I want to say right at the beginning that you too can have some technology. There's a little memory stick outside that has this report on it, and you can pick one up as you leave out of here. So we hope that you'll take advantage of this. There is a gigantic study that I'm about to describe to you. The 125 studies and 49 research syntheses that were captured are on our websites, the NEPC and LPI websites, if you want to find them. But we do have on here a brief, which you can easily read and enjoy about the study. And we're really thrilled to be able to talk about community schools, as we say, building schools that really build communities. As part of the prospect for education reform and improvement moving forward under ESSA. Now, I am not an author of this study. I do lead the Learning Policy Institute, but the authors of this study, Jeannie Oakes, Anna Mayer, and Julia Daniel, reviewed all of that material and all of that research and are putting out a series of publications around it. We're releasing the first of those today, and you'll get to see Julia in just a moment. We see this work in the context of today's challenges. It's important for us as citizens of the United States to acknowledge those challenges, the deepest income inequality that we've had since before the big crash in the 1920s. We have child poverty at rates that exceed those of any industrialized country in the world. About 1 in 4 children living in poverty. We have child homelessness rates that are so huge that you could fill every NFL stadium in the country with children on a Sunday and still have more homeless children beyond that. And that's been growing and increasing. We have a tattered safety net that is about to become more tattered, if we can believe what is being proposed right now in the budget. And it's really a kind of an aggressive neglect of children that we've been experiencing increasingly over the last 30 years. That coupled with spending cuts in schools, most states, 30-some states, have not yet recouped the spending cuts that occurred during the Great Recession. And fragmented services are the things that people contend with in many, many communities around the country today. And then we have a lot of solutions that have not worked, and we've sort of seen those. No Child Left Behind was finally left behind, but it left solutions that have not worked in its wake quite often. Testing without investing was a major strategy. More tracking. Kids who did not do well on the test would be put in a narrowed curriculum, which was just ELA and math, and no science, no social studies, no art, no music, no PE. All of those things which we actually know build cognition and build your capacity to think and perform have become frills in a lot of schools. School closures have been widespread across the country in at least 20 cities and privatization. So those are the contexts within which the question about what should we be doing to really enable children to succeed, families to succeed, and schools to meet all of the expectations that we have put upon them. We really need to look at ways that we resist and lean back against failed solutions and put in place those that really work. Community schools are both a place and a set of relationships between the school and community resources. Marty gave a beautiful description of all of the components of community schools. And when we did this research, we looked at community schools in several ways, both as a comprehensive set of investments and activities that you are so familiar with and engaged in, and also as 4 separate pillars which make up most community schools. Integrated student supports, health and mental health supports that are wrapped around students, expanded learning time and opportunities before and after school time, which may be enrichment time, support with homework and others, family and community engagement, both in the life of children at the school, but in the life of the school more generally, and often for services for parents themselves. And collaborative leadership and practices within the school in which teachers are collaborating, Leaders are collaborating with teachers and parents and community organizations, and it is that rowing together that gets the pieces put in place. We reviewed research within each of those 4 pillars and for community schools as a comprehensive intervention overall. And we did that in the context of the Every Student Succeeds Act, because it does call for evidence-based interventions for schools that are identified for improvement. There are 4 kinds of studies that can be used to argue that an intervention has been proven sufficiently to be used and to have funding spent on it. Those include experimental studies, quasi-experimental studies, statistically controlled studies, and others that have a strong evidence base, even if it doesn't meet all of the former conditions. The extent to which you have to have rigor in the scientific base is relative to the schools that you want to use this intervention for. The more needy the school, the more rigorous the research that is needed. And so we looked at the evidence. Our research review looked at comprehensive programs, each of the 4 pillars. As I mentioned, 125 original studies, 49 research syntheses were reviewed. Thank Julia and Anna for most of that work. And what did we find? Overall, we found that community schools meet the ESSA evidence standard, that there are rigorous studies in all of those tiers for each of the pillars and for comprehensive community schools overall. We found that implementation matters. This is not news to you. A better implemented approach where people are focused on continuous improvement, where you have a stable faculty, where you have strong leadership that is committed to the ideas and to organizing supportive strategies for the implementation does better. There are a wide range of models that yield benefits, and those include academic achievement benefits, attendance and high school graduation rates, which usually come first when you implement a community school model, and then improved peer and adult relationships, attitudes towards school, reductions in racial and economic achievement gaps. Ultimately, there's a cost-benefit savings, depending on which model you look at, that can range from $10 to $15 for every dollar that is invested. So I'm going to call on Julia to talk about a couple of the concrete examples of these programs.
Thank you. So thank you for having us. It's really exciting to be in a room with people who are actually doing this amazing work and that we're learning from and studying from. So we studied the 4 pillars, and then we also studied some of the studies of community schools, and just wanted to highlight a couple of them that were really rigorous research as well as impressive findings. So one is the community schools effort in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This initiative included at the time 27 community schools, and the core components of those schools were cross-boundary leadership, so school members and community members were sharing leadership in how the school was run. Holistic programs, services, and opportunities that attended to the academic, emotional, physical, cognitive, and social needs of the whole child. Community and family engagement that was grounded in reciprocity and trust, so really engaging people in the running of the school. And community-based learning in real-world context, so bringing students out into the community and having that be part of their learning. So they did a really rigorous quasi-experimental evaluation. And what they found was that the schools that were in what they called the mentoring and sustaining phases, so the schools that were really successfully implementing the model, had significantly higher 5th grade math and reading scores in years 3 and 4 of the implementation. So this is part of what we're seeing, is it takes sometimes a few years to get the academic gains to be seen, but because they did this rigorous evaluation, they found that those gains were being made. An important finding was also that low-income students in the schools were scoring better than low-income students who were attending more affluent schools did. And part of the reason that they found that this was happening was because schools that had particularly strong forms of collective trust, especially between students and teachers, and also between teachers and community, the students were achieving higher. And so this is important when we think about how low-income students and communities are going to succeed. So I think what this study in particular shows is that trust and collaboration are really important to community school success. The next one that we looked at is City Connects. So this is a program in Boston that I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with. And the City Connects program really focuses on addressing out-of-school factors for children living in poverty. They provide integrated student supports through school site coordination and having a coordinator at the school that can make sure students are able to access those supports that they need. They did a recent study that showed that elementary school students in their schools who started off with significantly lower grades at the beginning of the intervention caught up with their peers in reading and actually were surpassing their peers in math scores by the 5th grade. And then they had similar results for middle school students and immigrant students. You can see that achievement gaps narrowed between the English language learners and English proficient students by 75% in math and 50% in reading. So these are huge gains. And then the benefit-cost ratio, which Linda spoke about, being 3.0 with net benefits of over $9,000 per student. This is consistent with the other cost-benefit analysis that we've seen, which there's generally a pretty large return on investments for community schools. So that's really promising. This program narrowed the achievement gap significantly because they work to connect each child with a tailored set of interventions, prevention and enrichment services that the child needs to thrive. The services are provided at the home, but also at school and in the community because they connect with over 280 community school partners, which is pretty impressive for a program of their size. The model relies intensively on collaboration among teachers, district administrators, student support staff, families, nearby higher education institute, and community agencies. So this was another major theme, is that these forms of collaboration with district really being able to support and engage teachers having power, being able to learn in professional learning communities in their school is really important for keeping teachers in low-income communities, which we know is very important for student success. And that the school site coordinators at these schools were the physical link between the school and the community agencies. As they identified strengths and challenges that the students were facing, they were able to connect those students to those services, and that provided space for teachers to be actually doing the teaching that they need to be doing. And then finally, I'm going to go quickly through this one for the sake of time, but the Community in Schools Initiative, this is the nation's largest dropout prevention organization. They have a site coordinator at the schools as well. They do really impressive annual needs assessments, so they measure what's working, what's not, and where they need to make improvements. And then they find these whole school as well as targeted services that they provide for the students. They've done a lot of randomized as well as quasi-experimental studies. They're finding really positive impacts in different studies, so 0.01 to 0.25 effect size on student dropout and graduation rates, attendance rates, and math scores. And similar to other studies, the more the schools are implementing it, the greater the impacts of the schools. So very promising research and work that y'all are doing.
And I hope you're applauding for yourselves because this is really the work that you are engaged in. We have a few lessons from the research. Take a comprehensive approach, really pay attention to implementation. Obviously, address local assets and needs. There is not a one-size-fits-all. Every community is different. Every set of needs is different. The more you can tailor that, the more effective it will be. Provide sufficient planning time for collaboration. This will be really important under ESSA because people who are just starting community schools are likely to succeed to a greater extent if they really have the opportunity to build the collaboration with all of the community agencies, families, so that you have the trusting relationships which then allow you to see the possibilities and the potentials that otherwise might not be apparent. ESSA provides opportunities in the state plans for school improvement strategies. There's 7% of Title I is set aside for school improvement. This can be one of those strategies. There are opportunities for stakeholder engagement and local decision-making roles that are in the law. And so your local education agency, your state education agency can be thinking with you about how to activate this for schools that are identified for improvement. Of course, the current budget negotiations are going to make a big difference. And you all probably know that, and some of you are on the Hill today. Who was already on the Hill? A few people, some people are still there, I know, that Title IV really is one of the major places where there's support for all of these funding streams that help community schools, and it is proposed for being zeroed out in the administration budget. A lot of people are going to have to get in there and really arm wrestle the process so that, in fact, what ESSA was intended to do can happen. And I just want to leave you with this thought. Because it comes up a lot when we talk about community schools. People who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. And that would be you. Thank you very much.